the desolate wilderness, and the protagonist's arrival. The wind howled through the skeletal trees of the Alaskan tundra, carrying with it the scent of frost and decay. The sun, a pale, distant ember, cast long, shifting shadows over the frozen ground, where the remnants of ancient glaciers lay buried beneath layers of snow and ice. This was a place where the land itself seemed to breathe, its silence heavy with the weight of forgotten things. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the faint metallic tang of something older, something that had not been disturbed in millennia. Here, in this remote and desolate expanse, the world felt both impossibly vast and unnervingly confined, as if the very fabric of reality had been stretched thin by the presence of something beyond human comprehension. At the heart of this eerie landscape stood a lone figure, a man whose presence seemed as out of place as the land itself. His name was Elias Vane, a seasoned explorer with a past as dark and unfathomable as the void that stretched beyond the stars. He had spent years wandering the edges of the known world, chasing rumors, myths, and the faintest traces of something that had eluded humanity for centuries. His face, weathered by time and hardship, bore the marks of countless journeys. Scratches from jagged rocks, the faint lines of old scars, and the ever-present shadow of something deeper, something that gnawed at the edges of his mind, even now. Elias had come to this place not for the beauty of the landscape, nor for the thrill of the unknown, but for a purpose that had haunted him for years. He had followed the whispers of an ancient secret, a story passed down through generations of those who had dared to look too closely at the stars. It was said that deep within this frozen wilderness, hidden beneath the ice and the snow, lay a place where the veil between worlds had been torn asunder, a place where the dreams of the cosmos bled into the waking world, and where the things that lurked beyond the veil had found a way to seep into the hearts of those who sought them. The air around Elias grew colder as he stepped forward, his boots crunching against the frozen earth. He could feel the weight of the unknown pressing against him, as if the land itself was watching, waiting. He had come seeking answers, but he knew that some secrets were not meant to be uncovered. And yet, as he stood at the edge of the unknown, a strange unease settled over him, a feeling that something was watching from the shadows, waiting for him to take the first step into the abyss. The first encounter. Elias's breath came in shallow, measured breaths as he trudged deeper into the wilderness, his boots crunching against the frozen earth. The wind had died to a low, mournful whisper, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting. The trees, ancient and gnarled, loomed over him like silent sentinels, their skeletal branches reaching out as if to grasp at the sky. He had seen this place before in old maps and forgotten journals, accounts of explorers who had vanished without a trace, their final words lost to the wind. But now, standing amidst the desolation, he felt the weight of something far older than the land itself pressing against him, an unseen presence lurking just beyond the edge of perception. Then, as he stepped over a fallen log, his boot struck something solid beneath the snow. He knelt, brushing away the frost and ice, revealing a symbol etched into the wood, ancient, jagged, and unlike anything he had ever seen. The carvings were deep, as if the wood had been carved by something with claws rather than tools, and the lines twisted in an unnatural pattern, as if they were not meant to be read by human eyes. A cold shiver ran down his spine, and he reached out, his fingers trembling as they traced the grooves. The moment his skin made contact with the symbol, a wave of sensation flooded through him, something vast and unknowable, something that pressed against his mind like the weight of 1,000 years. His vision blurred, and the world around him twisted, the trees stretching impossibly high, the sky folding in on itself. He was no longer standing on the frozen ground, but floating in a vast, endless void, where the stars were not points of light, but gaping maws devouring the darkness. A presence vast, ancient, and incomprehensible watched him from the depths of the void, its form shifting and writhing like ink in water. It was not a thing of flesh nor of bone, but something beyond the limits of human understanding, something that had existed before time had a name. Then, with a sudden jarring lurch, he was pulled back into the present, gasping for breath as he collapsed to his knees. The forest around him was unchanged, the symbol still etched into the wood, but the air was colder now, thick with the scent of something old and dead. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind reeled from the vision. He had seen it, whatever had been waiting for him, and it had seen him in return. The descent into the unknown. Elias rose slowly, his hands trembling as he wiped the frost from his brow. The vision had left him shaken, his mind still reeling from the vast, unknowable presence that had washed him from the void. He had seen it, and it had seen him. But the question that gnawed at him now was not who or what had been waiting in the darkness. It was what it wanted. He had come to this place seeking answers, but now, Standing at the edge of the unknown, he realized that the answers might not be the kind he was prepared to face. He turned back toward the trees, his gaze sweeping over the frozen landscape, searching for something, anything, that might give him a clue. The wind had returned, a low, mournful howl that seemed to echo from the very bones of the earth. The trees swayed, their branches creaking as if whispering secrets to one another. He took a step forward, and the snow beneath his boots shifted, revealing a faint, unnatural indentation in the ground. It was not a natural indentation in the ground. It was not a natural formation, but something else, something that had been carved or perhaps gouged into the earth. He knelt, brushing away the snow, and his breath caught in his throat, the branches creaking as if whispering secrets to one another. He took a step forward, and the snow beneath his breathing secrets to one another. He took a step forward, and the snow beneath his boots shifted, revealing a faint, unnatural indentation in the ground. It was not a natural formation, but something else, something that had been carved that they kneeced through. The tree! But these were deeper, more elaborate, as if they had been made by something with greater strength and purpose. He traced the lines with his fingers, feeling the grooves as if they might lead him somewhere, as if they were a map to something hidden beneath the ice. A strange compulsion pulled him forward, an instinct he could not explain, as though the land itself was guiding him toward an unseen destination. He pressed on, following the markings until the trees gave way to a dense thicket of gnarled roots, tangled and twisted as if they had been pulled from the earth by some unseen force. The air grew colder, the wind now a whisper of something ancient and unfathomable. Then, as he stepped over a fallen log, the ground beneath him gave way, and he tumbled into darkness. He landed in a cavern, the air thick with the scent of damp earth, and something else, something metallic, something that sent a shiver through him. The walls of the cavern were lined with strange, bioluminescent fungi, their pale glow casting shifting shadows that danced across the rock. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft, rhythmic drip of water from unseen crevices. He rose to his feet, his breath shallow, his heart pounding in his chest. Then he saw it. A clawed artifact, half buried in the dirt, its surface worn by time but still unmistakably alien. The metal was dark, almost black, and it shimmered with an unnatural sheen that seemed to shift in the dim light. Something metallic, something that touched the surface. The moment his skin made contact, his breath shallow, his heart pounding in his chest. Then he saw it. A clawed artifact. His jark, whole. A wave of heat surged through him, and he gasped, stumbling back as if burned. The artifact pulsed, a slow, rhythmic beat that seemed to echo in his bones. It was not just a relic, it was a warning. He turned away, his mind racing. He had come seeking answers, but now he was certain of one thing: he was not alone. And whatever had left this mark in the earth, whatever had carved the symbol into the tree, was watching him, waiting for him to take the next step into the tree, was watching him, waiting for him to take the next step into the unknown. The unfolding enigma, Elias's fingers still tingled from the artifact's unnatural warmth, but his mind was already racing ahead, piecing together the fragments of the mystery that had begun to unravel before him. The clawed relic was not the only clue. Its presence was a sign, a beacon pointing towards something deeper, something hidden beneath the layers of ice and earth. He had to know more. He had to follow the trail. He stepped forward, his boots crunching against the frozen ground as he moved deeper into the cavern. The bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow, illuminating the walls with an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse in time with the artifact's rhythm. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something else, something a scent of damp stone and something else, something metallic, something that sent a shiver through him. He scanned the cavern, his eyes darting over the walls, searching for anything that might lead him closer to the truth. Then he saw them, more markings etched into the rock with the same jagged precision as the symbol on the tree. They were not just symbols, but something else, something metallic, something metallic, something metallic, something metallic, something metallic, something metallic. The seemed, as it qued, to shift and writhe as if alive. He traced the lines with his fingers, feeling the grooves as if they might lead him somewhere, as if they were a map to something hidden beneath the ice. The markings were not random. They formed a pattern, a sequence that hinted at a message, though he could not yet decipher it. A sudden gust of wind howled through the cavern, though there was no opening to let it in. The air grew colder, and the glow of the fungi dimmed, as if the very light was being consumed by the darkness. Elias's breath came in shallow, measured gasps as he pressed forward, his instincts urging him to move, to follow the trail before it disappeared. He reached the far end of the cavern, where the walls sloped downward into a narrow passage. The air was thick here, almost suffocating, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant drip of water. He stepped into the passage, his torch flickering as he moved deeper into the unknown. The walls were lined with more carvings, but these were different, larger, more intricate, as if they had been made by something with greater strength and purpose. They depicted figures, human-like, but not quite human. Their forms were elongated, their limbs twisted in unnatural angles, and their faces were obscured by shadow. Elias's pulse quickened. He was no longer just following a trail. He was being led somewhere, drawn into a mystery that had been waiting for him for centuries. He had seen the symbol, felt the presence of the entity that had washed him from the void. Yet not quite human. Their forms were elongated, their limbs twisted in unnatural angles. Their forms were elongated, their limbs twisted in unnatural angles, and their faces were obscured by shadow. the threshold of something even greater. Then, as he moved deeper into the passage, the air around him shifted. The cold grew unbearable, and the walls seemed to close in, pressing against him as if the passage itself was alive. He could feel it now, something watching him, something that had been waiting for him to take this step. He was not alone in the cavern. A low, guttural whisper echoed through the passage, though there was no source. It was not a sound, but something deeper, something that resonated in his bones. It was not a language, but a message, and it sent a wave of fear through him. He had come seeking answers, but now he was certain of one thing. The entity was not just watching him, it was speaking to him. He pressed forward, echoed through the passage, though there was no source. His breath shallow, his mind racing. He had to know what the entity wanted. He had to understand the message hidden in the carvings, the symbols, the clawed relic. He had come too far to turn back now. And yet, as he moved deeper into the passage, he could not shake the feeling that he was being drawn towards something he was not meant to see. The confrontation with the unknown Elias's breath came in ragged gasps as he pressed forward, the passage narrowing until the walls seemed to close in around him. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, as if the very fabric of reality had been stretched thin by the presence of something ancient, something that had been waiting for him. The whispering voice that had echoed through the cavern was still there, but now it was louder, more insistent, as if it were calling him forward, urging him to take the next step. Then the passage opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. The walls were lined with the same jagged carvings, but here they were more elaborate, more intricate, as if they had been etched by something with an intelligence beyond human comprehension. The floor was covered in a strange, pulsating substance that seemed to shift and writhe as he stepped forward. It was neither solid nor liquid, but something in between, something that defied the laws of nature. At the center of the chamber stood a figure tall, impossibly tall, its form shifting and writhing like ink in water. It was not a being of flesh nor of bone, but something else entirely, something that ceiling lost entirely, something that shifted and writhed as he stepped forward. It was neither solid nor liquid, but something in between, something that defied the laws of nature. Trembling, the entity did not answer. Instead, it reached out, its elongated fingers stretching toward him, and the moment its shadow touched his skin, a wave of sensation flooded through him. He gasped, his vision blurring as the world around him twisted and shifted. He was no longer in the chamber, no longer standing before the entity. He was somewhere else, somewhere vast and unknowable, where the stars were not points of light but gaping maws devouring the darkness. He could feel the entity's presence now, not as a being, but as something vast, something that had existed before time had a name. It was not a thing of flesh nor of bone, but something beyond the limits of human understanding. It was not evil, nor was it good, it simply was, and then, just as suddenly, he had seen the symbol, felt the presence of the entity that had washed him from the void, and now he was standing at the threshold of something even greater. And then the vision returned. He was no longer in the chamber, no longer standing before the entity. He was somewhere else, somewhere vast and unknowable, where the stars were not points of light but gaping maws devouring the darkness. He could see the entity now, not as a being, but as something vast, something that had existed before time had a name. It was not a thing of flesh nor of bone, but something beyond the limits of human understanding. And then he saw himself. He was not standing before the entity. He was part of it. He was not an observer, but something else, something else. Something. And then the vision returned, the bone but as something vast, something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. He was not Elias Vane. He was something else. And then the vision shattered, and he was back in the chamber, gasping for breath, his body trembling. The entity was still there, watching him, waiting for him to understand, but he could not. He had come seeking answers, but now he realized that the answers were not meant for him. They were not meant for anyone, and the entity was not a thing to be understood. It was a thing to be feared. The endless descent Elias's mind unraveled, feared. The endless descent Elias's mind unraveled further, his thoughts no longer his own, but something else, something that had existed long before time had a name. The entity's presence was no longer a whisper. No longer. They were not meant for anyone, and the entity was not a thing to be understood. It was a thing to be understood. It was a thing to be understood. It was a force pressing against him. It was something deeper, something that had seeped into his very being, that had become a part of him. He was no longer Elias Vane, the seasoned explorer who had come seeking answers. He was something else now, something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The chamber around him was no longer a place of stone and shadow, but something else entirely. The walls had shifted, the floor had dissolved into an endless void, and the entity, no, not the entity, but something beyond the limits of human understanding was no longer a presence but a force that had consumed him. He was not standing before it. He was part of it. He could feel it now, the entity's essence flowing through him, through his buried being. He was no longer Elias Vane, the Sevenus Stockled, the Indili Four had dissolved into an endless void, and the entity, no, not the entity, no longer separate from it. He was not an observer, not a seeker of knowledge, but something else, something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The whispers had ceased, the visions had stopped, and now there was only silence. And then the world around him shifted once more. He was no longer in the chamber, no longer standing before the entity. He was somewhere else, somewhere vast and unknowable, where the stars were not points of light, but gaping maws devouring the darkness. He could feel the entity's presence now, not as a force, but as something that had always been a part of him. He was not a man. He was not a man. He was not a being of flesh or bone. He was something else entirely, something that had existed before time had a name, something that had always been there, with a rich, that had watched over the stars for eons, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And now that moment had come. He was no longer Elias Vane. He was not meant to be. He was something else now, something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And as the void around him stretched endlessly, as the stars devoured the darkness, he realized that the entity was not a thing to be understood. It was not a thing to be feared. It was something beyond the limits of human comprehension, something that had existed before time had a name, and would exist long after the last human had faded into the void. And he was part of it now, forever. The shadows of the unknown Elias Vane was no. That Omenanar Dadave Don Sus. More. He had not died, not in the way that mortals understood death, but he had become something else, something vast, something beyond the limits of human comprehension. He had come seeking answers, and in doing so he had become one with the entity that had washed him from the void. He had not been consumed, not in the way that lesser beings were, but he had merged with the thing that had existed before time had a name. He was no longer a man, no longer a seeker of knowledge, but something else entirely, something that would endure beyond the end of the world. The stars had not changed, but they had always been watching. The entity had not been waiting for Elias, not in the way that lesser beings waited for their time to come, but he had merged with the thing that had existed before time had a name. He was no longer a man, no longer a seeker of knowledge, but something else entirely, the dotted, waiting for something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And now that moment had come. Elias was no longer an observer, no longer a seeker of the unknown. He was the unknown, and the unknown was eternal. The story of Elias Vane would not be found in any journal. No map would mark the place where he had stood before the entity, and no explorer would ever seek the truth that had been hidden in the frozen wilderness. The entity had not been a thing to be understood, but something that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And now that moment had come. The world would continue as it always had, as it always would. The stars would burn, the tides would rise and fall, and the wind would howl through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of the unknown, but the entity would remain watching, waiting, and forever beyond the reach of human understanding. And in the silence of the void, the entity would watch, waiting for the next seeker, the next one who would come seeking answers. But they would not find them, they would not understand, and they would not return. Do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories. Hit the notification bell to be notified of new stories when they become available. Feel free to leave a comment and tell me if you enjoyed the story and want to hear more like it.